We welcome you to our third part of the series of webinars that we offer to our members in the wintertime. Jim Agavitas, owner and president. Jim is a graduate of Minuteman Landscaping Incorporated. Jim is a graduate of Babson College with a degree in finance and entrepreneurial studies. His primary office is outdoors, where he spends most of his time meeting with clients, conducting site visits, and property assessment and inspections. Jim is a NOFA accredited landscape professional and a Massachusetts certified horticulturist. He is proactive in the industry, conducting seminars on the benefits of organic lawn care at Bentley College, the University of Massachusetts Amherst Stockbridge School, and the Arnold Arboretum, as well as other community organizations. Jim continues to provide consulting services to schools, suburban parks, and recreation departments and condominiums. What started as a way to help defray college tuition has evolved into a 40-year passion of creating beautiful lawns in a safe and environmentally friendly manner. Jim is married to Danielle, and they have 3 children, Grace, James, and Zoe. So Jim, welcome to our organization today and to our members. And I'm going to let you take it away by introducing yourself and to have you go with the flow.
Sure. Thank you, Marjorie. I want to thank you and the Garden Club Federations of Massachusetts for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to share my experiences and something I'm very passionate about and something I care about. So thank you for the opportunity to share with your members. Natural organic gardening is something that I've been doing for 41 years, so a long time. I learned about organic gardening from my grandmother. My grandmother was a phenomenal, probably the best gardener I've ever known, but she had wonderful vegetable gardens. We lived in the city. We lived in Boston, right on the Newton line in Brighton. And we had peach, pear, plum, apple. We had 3 different types of grapes in our vineyard, and we had all kinds of vegetables. And I was the only boy in the family, so guess what? I got to turn the garden over and carry compost and harvest and carry produce to the neighbors that we had in excess. And I really learned a lot about loving the earth, loving the garden, and just being respectful and I think being a good steward of the garden through my grandmother. Went to college, as you had mentioned, started doing this to work my way through school, started learning a lot more about the effects of chemicals, and started to target sort of my goals and my aspirations towards the natural organic landscaping. And that's where we are today. I'm still active in the business. The business is still going, and still carrying on some of the principles my grandmother taught me and learned a few more along the way. And going to start today by talking about how does a natural organic program work? A lot of people ask me that question. It's something that I do every day, so I'm very happy to share what we do and how we do it. But a natural organic program will start with a couple of things that are really important, because organic is not a cookie cutter approach. We can't do like a 3-step or a 5-step program. It just doesn't fit what nature wants to do, because every property is a little different. So you customize. So one of the things I do, I get out of the truck, I walk to the front door, I introduce myself to the homeowner, and we walk around and I do a visual test. I see what I can see on the property. I start taking some notes as to what I'm seeing. I start to think about some tests that I have to do. One of them would be a compaction test. And a compaction test is going to tell me how compact the soil is. It's going to give us a lot of clues as to what we can and can't do. And it's going to also be the key to how we go about our seeding program. And we'll talk a lot about that a little later. Soil testing, both for the chemistry and biology, are crucial. They really are the lifeblood of an organic program. You need to know what you're treating and how much to treat it with. And then there's soil texture. And the soil texture is that sand, silt, and clay component that really tells us a lot about how we'll water, what we can grow in those soils, what kind of seeds that we should be using. And we do those kinds of things in different ways. So we'll start with the visual test. I typically get out. The slide on the left is a lawn that I'm walking on, and I can see what I can see. I can see plantain. I can see some chickweed. I see clover. These are indicators. They're telling me something. So it's one of the clues to sort of accurately customizing a plan. We need to see some of the things that are going on in the lawn, because the weeds that we see can also be symptoms of what's happening underground. So we want to pay attention to that, and I'll talk about that in a second. This list on the left is a list of conditions that promote weeds. So for example, if we have chickweed, we're typically mowing too short, too much sun exposure. If we have crabgrass, we have dry conditions. Maybe a sprinkler is not working, or it's a slope, or we don't have water, or it's a drought. If we have nutsedge, it's usually poor drainage, clay soil or a depression of some sort. Those weeds will thrive in certain conditions. So one of the jobs of a natural organic lawn care provider is to read the symptoms of what's happening on the lawn. Another thing that we would look at is light conditions. I would look at the trees and how much sun we're getting. So as you can see, we're assessing the things that are important to growing grass, and this goes for other plants as well. We do a lot of plantings and plant installations and garden maintenance, but mostly today we'll be talking about lawns, but these principles will apply also to our plants as well. And so when we're doing these things, we're looking at light, we're looking at our soil conditions, what kind of weeds we have. And we're also looking at the terrain, and the terrain is kind of important. Sometimes I'll go to a spot and I'll see a lot of depressions, or I'll see a lot of a sloped area where I know the water can't stand for very long. So that's going to be a dry area. So we're constantly looking for the conditions that are going to either make our program a success or bring a challenge. Rocky soils, root infested soils. These are all things that we take note of just to make so we know what we're dealing with. And most of us, truth be told, most of us don't deal with an entire lawn with the same condition. We may have a backyard that's shady, a front yard that's sunny, and so there's some alterations that need to be made there. Next thing we want to really evaluate is compaction. And to alleviate compaction, we use core aeration. The machine in the front is a core aerator. The machine in the back is a slice seeder. This is two of our guys working at a horse farm that is a client of ours. They're doing some fall seeding here, but the aeration would happen with a coring machine like this here. And we would use our compaction meter prior in our first initial visit to see what kind of compaction we have. And we're going to talk a little bit more about compaction and some of the things that cause some problems in our soil biome. But this is a really wonderful tool to tell us whether we need to do it or we don't. And doing it excessively is not always good. So we don't do it rote. We don't do it blindly. We always take our time and figure out if we really need it. And if we do, this is the way we can test it and be accurate about it. We also use this tool here. Maybe some of you have seen this before. It's called a soil profiler. And the rectangular area to the bottom of the slide has a hex nut on it that you can remove, and you can place that into the ground, stick it in the ground, and you can get a core sample of what your soil profile looks like. It is a wonderful tool. It tells us how much loam we have, or topsoil, clay, sand, and we can start to get an idea what some of the challenges will be based on what we see in the profiler. Then we're going to assess water. This slide's a little premature, so I'll wait on that one. But we assess water. I usually look around. One of the first things I do is I see if there are sprinkler heads in the ground, or if there's a backflow preventer, trying to figure out if whatever program we're going to recommend can be watered. Sometimes it's a spigot. We'll ask questions like, does the spigot work? Is it available? Another question we ask is, are you home all summer? So if we're doing a program and someone vacations on the Cape all summer and no one's there to water, we've got to take that into consideration as well. You know, grass plants are made up of 70% water, so it's important that we water wisely. Very, very important. We talked a little bit about the soil profiler. This is where the watering sort of piece comes in. When we get our soil profiler, if we see we have a lot of sand, we know that the soil's porous and it's not going to hold water for very long. So our watering routine is increased. Likewise, if we see a lot of clay, we know it holds a lot of moisture and we're going to need to lighten up on the water so that we're not overdoing it. So really it's about natural organic is really about using natural products, but also being wise about what we see, what we're seeing, so that we're not just doing things because the forsythia is in bloom, we're putting down weed control. There's not a lot of automatics in organic. It's not like by this date we do this. There is one thing that's for sure: when you put the good stuff in, you get the good stuff out. That is for sure. That theory works time and time again. But when it comes to timing individual treatments, it's really about seasons and about of the material that we're going to use. I want to now switch over to mowing. And this is a slide of a lawn that we've worked for the last 20 years. And I'll just give you a little background on this lawn. This lawn was a chemical lawn for 12 to 15 years prior to us starting. This was a heavy chemical lawn. When we first took this lawn on, it literally had a couple of weeds on it. It really was a synthetic lawn. It also, in the middle of this lawn, is the septic system for this family. So that's a very sandy bedded area where we know we're going to get a lot of crabgrass. We just know it because the water can't be held long enough to sustain the grass plants. So this is the fall of about 2019, and we've been working on it for a few years. And you can see it's pretty healthy. It's green. It looks pretty full. I imagine if we walked over it, we'd see some weeds as well. That's what an organic program does. But I think, you know, the point of this slide is to see how high the grass is and to see how healthy it is. And that's why we talk about mowing the grass around 3.5 to 3 3/4 inches. Some folks say 3 inches. There's been some new research that says that extra half an inch, 3/4 of an inch makes a really big difference on root growth and survivability. And people would say to me, why? Why are we cutting the grass so high? And there's a lot of good reasons for that. One of the main reasons is it's shading out the soil. The longer the grass, the more of a canopy it creates, which creates a cooler soil surface. And if we think about it, how weeds work, our summer weeds, when our soil temperatures get to about 55 degrees and above, our summer weeds start coming in earnest. They start coming in of crabgrass. We start to see lots of weeds coming in that time of year, nutsedge, etc. And so if we can keep that grass or that soil cooler longer, we're going to have a chance of slowing down the weeds coming in. Another reason why we would do it is for insect and disease resistance. All the energy for a grass plant during the growing season is in the plant itself. So the longer it is, the more energy it has, the more nutrients it has, the healthier it's going to be. It's going to be able to withstand insect and disease challenges. The other thing is it shades out the sun-loving weeds. If we have sun-loving weeds and they're not getting sun, we're going to get an extra benefit from that as well. And then deeper roots. The grass plant up top, especially during germination time, the grass plant up top will be correlating to the grass plant down the bottom. So we'll get some deeper roots from this. And we're also going to get more drought tolerance because of the nutrition and the condition that it's in. And then healthier plant because of photosynthesis. The bigger plant, the bigger the receptor is for sunlight. The more energy, carbohydrates, the healthier the plant that way there. So there's a number. That's just 6 things that I could think of off the top of my head. But longer grass really makes a difference in an organic program. Big, big difference. Following up with that, these are just some suggestions about lawns in case you guys are doing some of this yourself. You want to always mow with a sharp blade. Now, you don't have to sharpen every time you mow and every time you go out there, but a couple of helpful hints that we tell our crews when they go out. First thing is pick up debris on the lawns, because if we're mowing over twigs and sticks and leaves and branches, it's going to dull the blades faster. So a quick walk around, pick up toys and dog bones and all that kind of stuff, and twigs and sticks is very helpful. The other thing is we like to leave our clippings. Grass clippings are very beneficial. We are returning back to the soil that which came from it, which can only be good in terms of facilitating and feeding the soil biome. So what I would say is a good rule of thumb that we try to apply, which sometimes we can't, but the 1/3 rule is a wonderful rule of thumb that we should really try not to be cutting more than 1/3 of the blade of grass because of two main reasons. One is we shock the plant, and number two, the clippings are really large and they are harder to disperse. And so for those two reasons, I would try to do that. And then I would say never to cut when it's wet. If we just had a heavy rainstorm, I would let the lawn dry out a little bit before I mowed it. You're going to tear up the turf. You're going to tear the grass plant, which is never good because it incites insect and disease issues as well. So we want to be very careful about mowing after a heavy rain or in the rain. And then another little trick of the trade that we like to share with people is because weeds are so hard for us to control, we're always looking for an advantage. I tell people that are taking care of their own properties, try to mow the section of lawn that's really weed infested. Say your front lawn, you have a sidewalk that's the town's and it's always crabgrass. I would mow that last. I would mow the parts of the grass that are your own first, and then I would rinse the bottom of the mower after I've done that. And when you do that, you're going to want to remove dislocate the spark plug, or if you're using an electric mower, take the battery out and just rinse the bottom so that you're not transferring weed seed to the parts of the lawn that are doing pretty well. So that kind of covers the mowing part. And now we'll get into the soil testing and the soil biology testing. So the soil test that we do is a soil chemistry test. Our nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are the main things. And we use an implement called a soil probe, a soil test probe. And the key to this is it's made from stainless steel. You don't want to use a shovel from the hardware store or an implement that you might have, a trowel that may be steel, because you're going to transfer particles of iron into the soil test, which will skew the soil test in ways that you'll have a hard time parsing out. So what you want to do is use a stainless steel implement. You want to go down maybe 6 to 8 inches. Really, you want to take into consideration where you want your root system to be, so 6 to 8 inches. And you want to do a random sample. You want to go through the yard in different areas and take a core out and then put it in a bag. We usually take the grass plant off, the green part off. We sift off the roots and we fill a soil test bag and we send it to a lab. And when we do our soil testing, especially if you're a homeowner doing it, I recommend making a diagram, because the next year when you test again to see your progress, if you're testing other areas of the lawn, you're not going to have a lot of confidence in saying, oh, yes, I really need to go up 10 pounds per thousand in my lime. You want to make sure that you're testing relatively the same areas so that you can have accurate responses to the soil test recommendation. Now, another thing about soil tests is sometimes in our yards, you're going to find that one or two areas are drastically different than others. And so in this case, I would highly recommend multiple soil tests. So say, for example, the backyard is not thriving, very weedy, can't do much with it, but the front is much better, has a whole different composition. So maybe you take two separate tests and label one, backyard, front yard. So when you make your adjustments and your treatments, they're more specific to what's happening. We do that quite frequently. There's some yards I'll do four soil tests because there are 4 different parts of the yard that are completely different. So just be aware of that. That will help you quite a bit. And then you always want to use a trusted lab. There are a lot of good soil test labs out there. We've been using Spectrum Analytic and Waypoint. We've been using Waypoint quite a bit now. They are not local. They are out of state. I believe one's in Ohio, and I can't remember where the other one is. But the results that we get from them are very pertinent to the inputs that we want to use in a natural organic program. And I guess before I go too far, I keep using this natural organic program, terminology, and I want to make sure I define that properly before I throw anybody off. A natural organic program is only going to use natural products. There's no bridge products, no synthetics, no herbicide, pesticide, or fungicide. The difference is that the term organic is a bit of a slippery slope because organic means whatever the element is, it has carbon in it. And that's a good thing. But carbon's also in petroleum, and it's also in salt, and it's in some other things that aren't so good for our soil. And so you want to make sure that whatever organic products you're purchasing or programs you're signing up for, if your heart is set on natural, you need to ask the question about ingredients. It's very, very important because it's a tiny bit deceiving. It just feels deceiving to me that we can say something's organic, but we can use chemicals and products that are harmful to our root system and our soil biology and still call it organic. So the natural part is a really big element. So every time I refer to that, I'm separating it out from these bridge programs or synthetic programs. What are we looking for? Here's a copy of a soil test. I apologize, it's very small. I have a copy here that I can read from, but this is from Wayside, and they give us some excellent information. First of all, they write up a little paragraph in the top there. There's a paragraph about an inch wide, and it tells us about what their recommendations are going to try to accomplish. And then there's a summary below that that tells us the characteristics of the soil. The soil that is in this slide says fair. The soil quality is fair. Many of the soils we get are poor, fair, good, or excellent, or very good. Really gives you an idea about setting an expectation. So when you know it's fair, you know the road to getting it right is shorter than if it were poor. And so these are wonderful, like broad spectrum indicators that give us an idea of what we're in for. And then as we go a little further down, we start to see soil pH, buffer pH, percent organic matter, cation exchange capacity. Now we're starting to talk about what we can do with our soil amending to bring our soils up to snuff, so to speak. So the soil test is for our soil chemistry. It's one of the most important things we can do on that side of things. And sometimes it takes a short period of time to get the results we want. Sometimes it doesn't. Because of the time constraint that I have today, I had a presentation I've done before on this, and I had 4 slides for the soil test, and I'll just say it briefly, that it showed the same property for 4 years in a row, and it showed the improvement that was made every 4 years until we started to say, okay, there's no more amending to do for the next few years. And then we checked the soil test every now and again to make sure we're not getting off by anything. But it does work. It takes sometimes a little persistence, but it's a really nice way to be accurate about what we're doing. I'll give you one more quick example. I have a client, has a lovely home in Concord, Massachusetts, and every year I get a phone call and he asks me, should I lime this year? And every year I tell him, not until we measure. We've got to measure. He goes, well, the guy I had before limed every fall. I said, that's okay. I'm not going to criticize anyone. I said, but I'd rather be accurate about how much we put down and whether we even need it or not. And so that's what we do every year. I got the phone call about 3 weeks ago. Are we liming this year? I said, I don't know. I haven't done the soil test yet. But it's just something that you guys should put in the back of your minds, that measure, always measure, because too much of a good thing in organic is not a good thing. You have to be relatively precise. You don't have to worry about it and say, oh, I can't do this. It's too hard. If I make a mistake, that's not the case at all. But when we measure and we have a reasonable sense of confidence, you can do really remarkable things with a natural organic program. So we have the trusted lab. We'll talk briefly about soil pHs. I'm not quite ready for that one. So soil pH is the acidity, alkalinity. You guys belong to a great garden club, I'm sure. You guys know what all that's about. But we need to know that in relationship to weed pressure. So when we're talking about lawns, when our pH values are low, we're inviting more weeds into our lawns. And so we have to think about pH as a weed control and as a preventative. It's going to impact how nutrients are taken in by the plant. And it also determines, well, we talked about this, the weed pressure in our lawn. So those two main things, we're always watching our pH. Organic matter content is the percent of plant and animal tissue in various stages of decomposition. I had to read that because I thought I might mess it up. But the real thing we're trying to do is leave things like lawn clippings, leaves, twigs, all kinds of earthworms and microbes, the good stuff. We're trying to put the good stuff in and create this organic matter content. And we should have in a good organic lawn somewhere between 10 and 15% organic matter. Make sure I had that right. 5 and 15% organic matter. And then the cation exchange, which many people aren't aware of. Cation exchange measures how well soil can hold a nutrient and water. And if you think about it, when cation exchange is low, what it's telling us is that the nutrients and the amendments that we're putting in are not staying in the root zone long enough for them to be effective or efficient. So we want to make sure that when we're doing that, that our cation exchange is high enough that we're getting the most bang for our buck when it comes to the materials we're putting down. And one of the examples I use quite frequently is it's almost as if when our cation exchange is low, that we're putting the fertilizer down, but we're only getting 50% or some percentage of effectiveness. And that's not what we want. We want as close to 100% effectiveness as we can get. And so what products can we use, okay? And what shouldn't we use? And I'll go over those as well. But the natural amendments that I've used in the past, and some of them I'm currently using, are things like soybean for fertilizer, humates for cation exchange correction, corn gluten meal for weed control, compost. We all know about compost. It's a wonderful thing to amend our soil with. Worm castings, lime, alfalfa meal, cottonseed meal, feather meal, chopped up leaves, and compost tea. All of these things you would see one of the things I like to encourage people to do when they read a label on a package, make sure the ingredients are ingredients you recognize, because that's going to tell you the story. If you see, alfalfa meal and feather meal and kelp and seaweed, you're getting what you're getting. It's authentically natural. Once you start seeing words that you can't pronounce or understand, now we're talking about synthetics being introduced, and we want to be careful. And I'm going to tell you why in a few minutes, but I'm trying to build up to it. There's a reason why we don't want to do that. So there are also some things that we know we shouldn't. This is a small list. There are many, but we shouldn't be using in a natural organic program manures, sewage sludge, synthetic fertilizers, urea-based fertilizers, or anything that contains biosolids, heavy metals, or pharmaceuticals. Can you imagine putting pharmaceuticals in your lawn? It's appalling when you think about it. So you want to be careful. You want to be careful of the source of natural, because remember what we said in the beginning, it may say it's organic, but if it's not a natural organic, it's going to be working against our soil biome, and we'll get to that part. So soil biology is measured under a microscope. This is a high-powered microscope I bought probably 20 years ago, just for the fact that we can actually read soil biology. So what we do is we take a sample of the soil, we put it on a lens, we drop a drop of saline solution on it, we look under the lens, and you can either see it teeming with microbes or not. When it's not, it's mostly minerals. You'll just see the minerals in the soil. It'll be devoid of life. And this is really the key and the crux of an organic program. The soil biology is the difference maker, whether it's vegetable gardening, perennial gardening, plants and trees, shrubs that you might be planting. Soil biology is the real key. And so when we add things like herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, synthetic products with petroleum and salt in them, And then we can go into some cultural things when we have excessive compaction or excessive construction. We are killing off or have killed off all the microbiology that's supposed to make soil alive. And that's where I feel we have our biggest challenge as gardeners, right? Because we want to have a natural garden, but we also want to have certain standards and expectations. And so the key that I'd like you to maybe take from this, well, first I want to explain two components. Compaction is going to be an enemy of microbes because where there's no oxygen, there's no life. And so that's why compaction. And if you think about it, every home that we live in had construction at one point or another. So the living spaces that we have already been challenged just by having a backhoe dig a foundation, having pallets of plywood and trucks and work trucks and delivery trucks on the front lawn. There's some serious compaction there. So we need to address that when we do an addition, or if we buy a new home, or if we live in a home that hasn't been tested. We want to think about those things. And then we also want to think about what this excess tillage means. Excess tillage is just a word that means construction. That is when, like, a backhoe goes into the soil, it's actually shredding and crushing and killing the organisms. It's a physical killing of the organisms. So compaction is the oxygen being removed. Excess tillage is rototilling, dethatching every year without thinking about whether you need to or not. And I'll just say this too, in case some of you are doing dethatching or someone's recommending it. Dethatching is only for chemical lawns because dethatching is not a grass clipping issue, it's a root zone issue. So if your root zones are dying and decaying because they're forced to grow at a very fast rate, which is what chemical fertilizers do, it's going to deplete what you have, and that grass is going to have a nice thick layer of thatch. And so you will need thatch. I can just tell you, I owned 3 thatchers. They are all have been sold over 35 years ago. We have not thatched a lawn since we've been full-time organic. And so you won't either if you go organic. So just a little side note there. And also keep in mind that it only takes 1 or 2 treatments of a fungicide or herbicide to wipe out a good amount of the population of microbiology. So that just brings me to a little sort of question that I hear all the time. Jim, is it okay if we just do one treatment, one pre-emergent treatment, and then we'll go right back to the organic? Or can we just do one every year and do everything else organic? And I always tell people, and it's not because I don't want them to have a perfect lawn or anything like that. It really isn't. It's just about how organic works, how natural organic works. If we take and we're building up our soil biome and our microbiology only to kill it off every season with an herbicide treatment, we're going 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and we're coming off that like continuum, that timeline continuum of progress, where we're trying to progress to a point where nature takes care of itself. And that's what kind of brings me to this next slide. Many of you may have seen this before. This is just the soil food web. It's an amazing process of how things work below the surface of the ground. The soil food web breaks down and releases nutrients in forms that plants can take in. It's nature's way of working, and it's always been the way nature works. And the soil food web is a system where microscopic organisms chew up and excrete out nutrients and help the plants grow and fight off disease challenges. So really, this is the secret to organic gardening. It's this soil food web. It's everything that happens underground. It's preserving the critters that are there, the amoeba, the protozoa, the ciliates, the nematodes, and earthworms, you name it. These guys are doing a lot of work under there. And it's also preserving the food sources, which are beneficial fungi and bacteria. And the part of an natural organic program that sort of aids this process is that through compost tea, we can put in the microorganisms, And through some of the food sources that we're putting in, we're feeding those food sources. So everything we're doing is either creating the critters or we're feeding the critters so that we can build healthy soil. And that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to mimic nature. We're trying to do what nature did perfectly right from the beginning of time and was interrupted in the 40s and 50s and 60s with the introduction of chemical use, when things were introduced like diazinon and Duraspan that totally wiped out microbiology. Now we're trying to go back to what was originally the way the system worked. And so let me see if I have a slide. I think I do have a slide. Let me just see if I can move this real quick. Sorry about this. Okay, so if you look at a natural forest, this biome has never been disturbed and therefore needs no fertilizer, pesticides, fungicides, herbicides. It doesn't even need us to water it. We don't even irrigate the natural forest, and nature does the work. If I were to take a little slide from nature and I would put it under my microscope, it would be teeming with microbiology, teeming. And so what we're trying to do is get back to that, right? We're trying to edge our way back to that, and you can't do it overnight. This is one of the things that I'm sad to say this because I wish you could. And we live in a society where, we have microwaves and everything sort of happens very quickly. This is not the case in nature. Although we can damage it quickly, we can't restore it quickly. It takes a little time to do that. And let me see where I'm at in the presentation. So yes, and so when we do this, when we start to work with nature, our inputs become less and less. So a lot of people will say to me, organic's more expensive, and there's a lot of upfront work to be done. And that is true in a lot of cases where soil's been mistreated, there's a lot of work to do to restore. But as time goes on, and we've got lawns now that we've worked for 40 years. I've got clients that we still have for 40 years, and all we do is fertilize. We keep our eye on the grub condition, and we seed in the fall. That's all we do. Their microbiology is in a good place. We do soil tests on occasion because we never want anything to get out of kilter, but it really proves itself out with time. It really works. Now, 40 years seems like a long time. Sometimes it's 3 years, sometimes it's 5 years. It's not 40 years. That's just one example. It can be 1 or 2 years. It depends on the amount of damage that occurred prior to starting the program. Let's see where we're at here. Let me put this back here and see if that'll help. All right, let's see. I am frozen here. I'm gonna see if that'll work. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what does a natural organic program look like in practice? Like, what can you expect? What would you have to do? What would you have to have a contractor do? You almost always need to fertilize 3 times a year. And I spoke with Marjorie about this a little earlier before we went on. And spring, summer, fall are the general guidelines, but you really need to be paying attention to the weather. You need to see, like, a cool spring tends to be not the best time to put down living organisms or the food, because if you think about that soil food web, there's not a lot of feeding going around when the soil temperatures are very cold. So wait a little longer on those cooler springs. Again, if it's a warmer spring, if things open up early and we're going strong early, of course you can do that. Summer, if we're in the middle of a drought, there's no, and you have no irrigation, I would recommend you use some wisdom there and not fertilize until we start getting a little bit of rain, or you can water. One other component here is this phosphorus fertilizer. Almost all bags of fertilizer have those 3 numbers, 25, 10, 15, whatever those 3 numbers are. And the phosphorus is the middle number, and the phosphorus is one that moves very slowly in our soil. And phosphorus also impacts a couple of things that you should be aware of. One is it causes algal bloom, which is an issue with surface water. And it also reduces the way nutrients are taken in by our grass plants. So I would guarantee you, if you've been using a synthetic program, that when you test, your phosphorus is going to be high, because in the commercial world of fertilizing, phosphorus is related to root growth. And everyone knows that more root growth, the better. but in essence, it's not because we're doing these harmful things on the side. So there are some wonderful no phosphorus fertilizers out there. So we use a 606 or a 601. And the reason why we can do 3 fertilizations is we're using slow release, water water insoluble, excuse me, and so that it's slow to break down, the plants can take it in, and we're not overdoing it. And then we go to our weed control, which is corn gluten meal. I mean, many of you have probably read about corn gluten meal, maybe even use it. It is a great source of nitrogen. So if you have, for example, clover in your property and it's a weed that you don't want, some people want it, some people don't, it's a nice way to eradicate or slow down the growth of clover when it's in these big patches in your lawn and you may not want it. And one reason why families don't want it is because sometimes the white clover can attract bees. And if they have kids that run around barefoot, they're a little concerned about it. But clover is not a bad weed. It's actually a good one. Corn gluten meal is not the most, I would say, highly effective weed control I've ever seen, but it does help. And it usually takes time for it to work. And it is a little expensive. And as you can see, it doesn't have a lot going for it that way, but it is something you can use in your arsenal to help you. We like fall seeding better. We would rather be proactive about putting seed into the grass than trying to prevent weeds from coming in. Grub control, we like milky spore when we have Japanese beetles, beetle grubs. Nematodes and cedar oil are also very, very good and help us when we have a European chafer and some other chafers, grub chafers that in the lawn. Then you want to defer to whatever your soil test recommends at this point. And then there's the fall aeration that we talked about. Some people ask me, like, why fall on the aeration? I don't want to open up any soil openings in the spring when the weeds are active. Just don't want to give them a stronghold. I don't want to give them a placeholder where they can start to come in. So I very, very, very infrequently will aerate unless it's really called for a different reason, because I want to eliminate inciting any more weeds in the lawn. And then the fall seeding is tremendous. It's just a tremendous way to do a lot of things. I've got some more information on that, so I won't spoil that yet. And then your soil test recommendations, when you use those after aerating, you're automatically delivering that nutrient 2 inches closer to where it needs to be because of those cores that were pulled out by the aerator. So it's also a nice way to take advantage of whether you need to lime or whether you need to add organic material or humates or whatever it is. Do that when you're aerating. It's a great way to sort of piggyback services. And now fall seeding. So every August, I do a walkthrough of properties to assess whether or not they're going to need seeding, which most of the time they do, and what kind of seeding. This is a property I have in Newton, Mass. I've worked for this family for 35 plus years. They're not a super fussy client. They don't want golf course. They've had dogs in the past. They've had kids. Kids are all graduated and working, and the dog is no longer. But still, they had a new patio put in the back, and the construction created this in the fall. So I'm sorry, in the summer. So when I get there in the summer, in August, I see this, and right away I need to know I need to address that, because if we don't, bare spots will just become weed infested. You want to take every single bare spot you have and grow something that you want to grow there. In this case, they wanted grass. And so what we did was we gave them an estimate to do seeding. And I just want to tell you a couple of things about seeding that just maybe would help you in terms of determining some good reasons why. One is it's going to best control weeds. It's going to fill in, so weeds are going to be crowded out. It's going to fill bare spots. It's going to thicken the turf, and that's going to eliminate erosion and other issues. If you had pets or if you had children and they're traipsing mud back in the house, so there's that kind of an issue. And you can revitalize an older lawn. Like us, lawns get older, they age out. And so when you aerate and overseed, now you're rejuvenating and replenishing bare spots, and you're making the average age of the grass plant you have much younger. So it makes sense to do that. And we're really doing a good job at saying to the weeds, there's no place for you here. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that an organic a natural organic program is not weed free. It's not. And one of the first things I tell a client when I meet them is, if you want a monoculture and if you want, golf course quality lawns, natural organic is not for you. It just isn't, because diversity is the key to nature, right? So we know that there'll be diversity in whatever we do in the lawn. And so we strive for a 70-30 in terms of percentages outcome. We want 70% lawn and we want 30% bare spot and weeds. That's sort of a general rule of thumb without it getting to be we're micromanaging that lawn more than we need to. And we've been able to do that. We've been able to do 80-20, 90-10, depends on the homeowner. If they want to seed, every year, if they want to make sure that they follow the soil tests every year, you can lower that number. But 70-30, when you look at it from a distance, it looks perfectly fine. It looks just like any lawn that you would notice. When you walk on top of it, you will see some weeds in there. And if you do have a larger patch of weeds, you can mechanically remove that. Say it's 5 feet by 5 feet, just mechanically remove it and seed. You can do things like that as well before they become a problem. So people also ask me, why do we want to seed in the fall? Why is the fall so good? There's some really great reasons for that too. The fall is really good because our soil temperatures are warm. We're just coming off of a warm summer, and our weeds are slowing down, so we don't have a lot of weed pressure. And we also have cooler evenings and a little more rainfall. And our grass plant, the roots of our grass plants are more active in the fall. So we've got some really good reasons to do that. Soil temperatures being warm will give us faster germination. More rain is going to help things germinate without wasting water and also at a faster rate. And then it's just a better time to do it. And we can couple it with our aeration, and we can couple it with our soil amending from our soil tests. So it kind of dovetails very well with a natural organic program. On the other hand, the spring seeding, people are always asking me, I need to seed in the spring. I need to seed in the spring. And we've been trained to do that. I think a lot of the commercial seed companies advertise a lot in the spring, and, seeding, it seems like the thing to do in the spring. Well, you can, but remember some of the challenges you'll have. You're going to have cold soil conditions, which means very slow germination. You're going to have high weed pressure. The weeds are just about ready to pop. So there's going to be grass and weeds that you're watering, and they're going to come up at the same time. And that's going to be discouraging when you look at the end product. And then you're going to go through a hot summer. This is the biggest thing I'd like you to understand about it. And one of the things, as you assess the success of an organic program, this natural program, you want to think of this one thing. The type of grass seeds that we can use in New England are cool season grasses. They're the ones that survive the winters. So if we use Bermuda or St. Augustine or some of these other warm season grasses, they can't survive our winters. So our grass plants, cool season grass plants, look tremendous in the spring, April, May, June. They look tremendous. Then July and August, for some reason, they look a little peaked. They look a little emaciated. Excuse me. And we have a problem now. We have a problem because the chlorophyll is receding and the plant's going into dormancy for survival. It's not because you're not watering enough. It's not because of anything you're doing, the fertilizer. It's because of the soil temperature. Soil temperature is rising. That's the trigger for the grass to recede chlorophyll. Once it recedes chlorophyll, it turns brown, and then the weeds pop up above it, and it looks like the lawn is going to all weeds. And that's not the truth, because once September comes around and we get some cool evenings and we get some rain, you're like, oh, I guess it was okay. So that's why, as in terms of setting expectations, excuse me one moment. As you try to establish your expectations, remember the summer is going to be the one where you're going to have to maybe look the other way a little bit, because that's nature's way of preserving a lawn. And if we take that away from it, the grass plant will suffer. We want to make sure that we don't think that dormancy is a bad thing. It really is not, because the fall and the spring are when our grasses perform the best. And so that kind of brings me to a question where I'd say, well, okay, then what kind of seed should we be using? And so we've got fertilizer, we've got water in place, we've got all these things, we've got the right time of year to do it. So the first thing I do is I find a national turfgrass evaluation program quality turf. It's called NTAP. Excuse me. NTAP tells me that what's in the bag is what's written on the label. Believe it or not, I've had various seed companies that I've worked with say that every once in a while the bags get mixed up. It's not intentional. No one's trying to pull a fast one on us. It's just that it happens. So we want to make sure we're getting the seed that we expect to get. And so let's take a look at some of the seeds. So here's a seed that we've used in the past called turf type tall fescues, and it's a wonderful seed. It's a tufted grass, meaning it has a singular root system, and it's drought tolerant. It can take some shade. It germinates relatively quickly, 10 to 14 days. It has a moderate fertilizer requirement, which is great because we don't have to pamper it, and it handles foot traffic reasonably well. And the reason why it handles it reasonably well is because it's tufted. It's not stoloniferous or sideways like other grasses. So the tufted grasses tend to pop out when there's a lot of twisting and turning and extra activity. Excuse me. Perennial ryegrass is less drought tolerant. It's a good seed, but it's a little less drought tolerant. It's very good in the sun. It germinates in 5 to 7 days. So if you need a quick crop cover, this is a good seed to use. It has a moderate fertilizer requirement, and it handles foot traffic reasonably well. The one thing I should tell you about perennial ryegrass is, in our experience, it's one of the grasses that goes into dormancy a little on the early side. So it starts to turn brown a little early. So if color of grass is something that's important to you, this might be one that you don't want to have a lot in your mix. Kentucky bluegrass is a great one. It's a beautiful grass. It's one we see in these football fields and these playgrounds and the heavy traffic areas. It's a pampered grass. Needs a lot of inputs. It's not very drought tolerant, so it needs a lot of water. It's very, very good in the sun. It germinates in 2 to 4 weeks. That's a long time to be watering, but keep in mind that it will require that. It has a high fertilizer requirement, and it's very, very good for foot traffic because it's stoloniferous. The roots are sideways, so when you twist and turn, it repairs itself, where the tufted grasses, when you twist and turn on it, they dislodge and they die from there. So fine fescue. This one here is a very drought tolerant grass. It's shade tolerant. It germinates in 10 to 14 days. That's pretty reasonable. Has a low fertilizer requirement, which is also attractive. And it has a poor tolerance for foot traffic, which is the downside. I'll give you a real life case. So maybe 15 years ago, I had a property in Wellesley, Mass. And a gentleman wanted us to seed his back lawn. And he told me, I've never gotten grass to grow here in the 40 years my wife and I have lived here. And I had read about this grass, and I told him, I said, there might be something you can try. So there was a small area under a tree that we did it, and it came in so beautifully. It looked like sod in the shade. It was a beautiful emerald green, and it came in so nicely. And he decided to mow it after 6 or 7 weeks, and then mowed it again another 2 or 3 weeks after that, and the grass started to die off. And it really speaks to the poor tolerance for foot traffic. So the reason why I tell you that is all of these grasses have some wonderful qualities. They have some qualities that might disqualify them from being used on your property. But the one thing I noticed about it is that each of them has a benefit, and you need to figure out what your criteria is when you're seeding. So if you've got a lot of sun and you've got 3 or 4 dogs that are big and they're rambunctious, you're going to need something with some bluegrass in it, or you're going to have mud. So those are the kinds of things we're talking about. And if you have a home where your lawn is more of a showpiece than where kids are playing, soccer and wiffle ball, and there's not a lot of foot traffic, you might be able to use the fine fescue. So that's why I put these slides in here so that you can see the benefits, you can see some of the challenges that they have, and maybe you can choose some seeds. Now, one other thing I should say about grass seed is most often we're using blends of grass seed, and so that you're not all one blade of grass. Diversity, as we talked about, is a very important part of sustainability, and we're going to want to mix them. And the other thing we do as a company is we carry several different bags of seed on the truck. So when we go to seed, because not all yards are uniformly the same with light conditions, soil conditions, etc. So you customize your seeding based on if it's too shady or more sunny, and then these types of grass seeds. There's types of seeding that we do, different applications. That slide I showed you with the big bare spots, that's a really good candidate for top dressing, where we scarify the bare areas to make sure that there's no hard pan on top. Then we would add a good quality composted loam. Then we would grade it off, and then we would seed it. Then there's aeration overseeding, which is when we infiltrate or integrate seed into the lawn through a mechanical method of aeration. We don't aerate and overseed big bare spots because we would just get tufts of grass growing sporadically. Wouldn't be a good finished look. So we top dress the big bare spots, and we aerate and overseed the thin areas and the areas that just need thickening up. Lawn renovation is when we go in and we completely remove the lawn and we start from scratch. And then sod is when we purchase grass that's been harvested, been grown on offsite, been harvested, comes in rolls, and we roll it right out. It already has a root system, and it has the top layer of 2 inches of grass. The thing about sod you should know is it's very, very highly treated and pampered at the nurseries where it's grown. There's a reason why there's no weeds. They're using herbicides, they're using pesticides. And so if you have allergies, or if you have some sort of reason why natural organic is the only way you can go, sod may not be a good option for you, because I've not found a natural sod. There's only one way you can get grass to be perfected that way. Slice seeding is another way to do it. I think I showed you the slice seeder next to the aeration as the guys were doing that. That's just these discs that put lines of grass seed in through a hopper system, and they just put grooves of grass in straight line. And then there's hydro seeding, which is a mixture of paper pulp, I think some green dye, some synthetic fertilizer, and seed. We don't use hydro seeding because of the synthetic fertilizer and dye component, but it is an option. I think it's a good option for places like universities and public spaces that don't have irrigation, because the paper pulp will hold the water and the moisture longer. And so it's very successful for applications like that. For homeowner use, I kind of steer clear of that. And then, let me see if I can move this here. So natural organic programs are really slow to react. So being proactive is really the only way we have of achieving our expectations. And that's what we're talking about. Seeding. We seed annually because we don't want, like, it's almost like an organic program is like a large a barge, a big ship. And you can't turn a ship like that quickly. It takes time to do it. And so by seeding and treating for grubs ahead of time, and soil testing more regularly, you're being more proactive, and you're able to get the results you want without having to wait long periods of time before the shift takes place. And so last thing I really want to talk to you guys about is watering. I'll talk to you about this first, though, lawn renovation. This is a house that I've worked on for 30 plus years. We did a new garden for them back in 2017. We removed everything. We improved the soil, graded, did our beds. And this is what a process of lawn renovation looks like. And this is that lawn after 4 weeks after the grass came in. If you notice, the stripes on the lawn are small stripes. It's not a big wide machine, big heavy machine, because the first couple mows after new grass comes in should be done with a grass catcher and a small machine so that you're not tearing up the soft turf. But this is what an organic lawn can look like. It's only going to get a little more weedy from here. Full disclosure. But if you do that and you keep up with the seeding and you keep up with the soil testing and the treatments, there's no reason why you can't have phenomenal turf that way. And then lastly, water. People are always asking me about how to water. So there's really two instances where you water for a lawn. It's like when you have an existing lawn, what will it require? And if you have a newly seeded lawn, what do you require for establishment? So for an existing lawn, we recommend 1 inch of water per week. And we usually ask people to measure either with a device like this or a coffee can or something. And what I'm asking people to do is to run your system, whether it's an above ground system or an in-ground system, run it for a period of time. Say we run it for a half hour and it collects 1 inch of water. Let's use 1 hour just to make it round numbers and easy to understand. We run the system for an hour, it accumulates to 1 inch of water. Then we know that we can water 20 minutes 3 times a week and have a sufficient amount of water to keep our plants alive and thriving. And so I highly recommend the measuring first, just like we do with soil testing. Watering is important because water is a valuable natural resource and we don't want to waste it. But living organisms like plants are also very valuable and we don't want those dying off unnecessarily as well. And so one last point I would like to make, there are alternatives to lawns. A lot of people are shrinking lawns. They're making more beds, perennial beds, ground cover beds. I just completed a 3-year process for a family that I work for in Newton, where here we took one section of that lawn and we removed it and we created pathways and perennial beds and all kinds of things. And this year we finished it off. I just tell people it's something you should think about. I feel like sometimes there's a misnomer there where people think that these lawns, homes without lawns have no maintenance. They actually have quite a bit of maintenance. You've got perennial care, you've got to cut back perennials, you've got a deadhead, you've got lots of weeding, mulching, fertilizing, watering. So there are inputs that you have to do, which doesn't make it a bad thing. It just makes it something that you need to think about if you want to invest the time. I find that what's worked best is sort of a combination. Lawn in the areas that are easy to handle and easy to manage, and bigger beds where it's harder to handle, like those shadier perimeter areas is one option that you have as well. And so that brings me to the end of my presentation. We're going to answer some questions, but I would like to just say in concluding that a natural organic program has many benefits. Most importantly, natural organic practices and keeps us and our families safe. And this helps us preserve the soil biome and protect our environments that we all steward and take care of and share. Natural organic programs and organic lawns do not come without challenges. Nature itself brings those challenges. We have too much rain some seasons, not enough others. Some seasons are cooler than others, some are warmer. Weather impacts our programs quite significantly, but that's the time that as a homeowner and as someone using natural procedures, we just need to alter our expectations. In those years of drought, we're going to get a few more weeds. In those years where we have plenty of rainfall, we can enjoy the green grass and all the benefits of having the extra water. A natural organic program can be slow to affect change. That's another point I want to make sure we're clear on. And it also can be costly up front. And so you want to be aware of that. But the commitment to doing the right thing on a consistent basis does make a difference. And over time, you'll see less inputs, healthier soil biomes, and experience more beautiful turf. And lastly, I am really grateful for this opportunity to share with you some of the ways that you can protect and preserve your outdoor living spaces for today and for the generations to come. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.
Jim, what a wonderful job. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful job. I have questions, but there are
Thank
some
you.
questions in the chat box, so I'll address those first. The
Okay,
first one's a little challenging, so I'll just say it and then we'll go back to it. Can you write out the or add links for the lab testing sites? I think you mentioned one of them, but Master Gardeners is also another one. We can probably do that at the end and type that right into the chat.
sure.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to go to the next question. Is it
Sure.
okay to use a manual broad fork to help with soil compaction after construction?
That is actually an excellent question. And I actually cut it out of the presentation because I thought it was going to run really long. But so those sort of spiked drums or the spiked shoes or anything that has a solid core and just pokes a hole in it is actually increasing the compaction. If you think about it, when we're forcing soil to the side, we're actually compacting it more. So the key to a good high quality aeration is coring. You want to pull a plug out of the ground so that you're alleviating the compaction instead of pushing the compaction in and over. So I would say if you can rent one from a rental place nearby, or maybe have a local contractor, maybe subcontract him to do that. That might be a better way. And also, when you do that, I feel like you're really not alleviating the tension and the tightness in the root systems of your plant. So it's also, well, I guess I can end it there. I think I've said everything that really pertains to that, but I have that question quite a bit because some of my clients have those shoes, the spiked shoes. There used to be like almost like a drum that looked like a roller that had spikes that people would use. I would steer clear of those if you can.
Okay, the next question from Judy Romano. My backyard looks terrible. Sandy soil and varying amounts of light due to nearby buildings shading some of the area. I've
Hmm.
heard clover is a good alternative to grass and is low maintenance. I don't know quite what her question is, other than maybe the clover, should
Sure.
that would be what she plants?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. And clover is a good solution. Now, I'll just share experiences because I think that's the best way we learn is through experience. Met a client in Lexington 2 years ago who had had another company prior to meeting us install a clover lawn. And when I met with her in late March, the entire front lawn was dirt and soil. There was nothing green there. And so I just warn people that anytime we take something like clover, which is an annual weed, that is going to be bare and barren all winter long. So you need to know if you've got pets and things, and it's your front lawn and you don't want it to look like that. That's a real thing that happens. So what I recommend to people is I still like the traditional grass seeds. I know they need more inputs. I know they're sometimes harder to grow, but I like the traditional grasses and I like to sprinkle in maybe 10% clover into that mix so that I'm doing something for the pollinators, but I'm not going to be without turf during the winter months and in the early part of the spring and late part of the fall. Part of her question was also the shade, and it's shade from buildings. You can't alter that. It's not like a tree where you can have them pruned and allow some filtered light in. So there you may want to start to think about ground covers and other things that you don't have to annually replace, because when you plant grass in deep shade like that, it's an annual exercise for almost seeding the entire area. It's like a renovation every year. And if you have any foot traffic in that area, it's going to be it's going to speed it up. And so what I would recommend there, if it's possible, maybe looking at some ground covers like Pachysandra, ivy, things that take deep shade, and maybe doing that. And then maybe having a little bit of lawn in the sunnier parts of the back lawn. If you've got a little part that's closer to your house, maybe 10 or 15-foot swath, maybe you make that grass, but you bring the ground cover up. And here's another little pointer. Like, we get our clues from what nature has given us. And you look at that lawn this spring, it's going to show you where the grass won't grow. And if it's everywhere, then you may have to do something with paths or patios or something. You might need a living space there to live in. But I would think if you want something that's alive, you maybe think about ground covers or perennials at that point.
Okay, we do have a lot of questions, so we'll try to get through them. Terry Luskin, her second question is, yes, what are your thoughts on using the micro clover instead of turf?
That's sort of the same answer that I had with the other one, except I would integrate it. I would always integrate it in, anytime we have one plant material, we are at the mercy of one disease or condition that wipes out our entire crop. So we want to make sure we have some diversity there. So I think if it were my lawn or one of my clients, I would recommend using some grass seed with some of the micro clover, and then maybe slowly over time adding a little bit every year. But I wouldn't make it an entire lawn based on my experience and what I've seen.
Okay, Janet Foley is asking, are voles bad for our soil, or are they aerating our soil and eating grubs, and it's just unsightly?
Hmm. I am not an expert on voles or moles, but I've seen them. I'm not sure if they're aerating. I tend to think they're not because they're more surface oriented in their damage. They kind of make those snake-like troughs or burrows. Um, we all my clients have us steer the moles away. We use this organic product that steers them away, and it's just one of those things where they're very disruptive with root systems. So I would say not the best aerator that we have in the garden is our earthworms. So the more your soil biome is intact and the more earthworms can be sustained, they're going to tunnel up and down and naturally aerate your soil. So that's the one I would be looking for versus the mole.
Okay, so this is kind of interesting. One question goes into the other. Regina is asking, you recommend milky spore. What about grub begone for eradicating a grub problem? But then Maria Bartlett answers, it's actually grub gone, not grub begone. A BT product, 100% natural, that kills grubs as effectively as any chemical product, better than milky spore and nematodes. Maria's become your assistant all of a sudden.
Well, those are great
Um,
questions. They're great
so
questions.
did that take care of it
I
or
think so. I'm not super familiar with the BT products. We used to use them long time ago when we were using nematodes. There's some correlation in there. We haven't used them in a long time, so I would take, is it Maria's advice? I would take her advice.
how about that, Maria? She's our environmental chairperson. Right person, right? Okay, next question again from Janet Foley. Are there other natural weed controls other than corn gluten meal you could recommend?
Yeah, corn gluten meal seems to be the one that's most readily available. There are weed controls that are non-selective, like burnout, which is an acetic acid and vinegar solution. We started making our own solution just with like a 5 times concentration of vinegar, white vinegar, and it works wonderful, but it's temporary because things like nutsedge and uh, what's the one? There's another weed we've sprayed it on. It's just not coming to me right now. It really strong weeds will not it, be under control. But if you have, for example, crabgrass growing in like a gravel pathway, you can use it there. But I don't know of anything for the lawn that's organic that works. And a name of a product. I'm sorry about that. I've not heard of anything.
Just a note from Terry Locken about Master Gardeners. They will do a soil pH testing, but not a full sun analysis.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, not a full
So,
soil analysis. I am a master gardener and we do the soil testing in Cape Cod, but
mm,
if you want a full analysis, you have to pay extra. Otherwise, it
that's
is
right.
free. Yeah.
That's
Have you
right.
run into, this is from Sarah Weaver, have you run into any problems with the Asian jumping worms?
We're starting to see them. So what we've done is we've steered clear of leaf mulch, which I've heard and read is a potential transporter of them. And we've just been using organic bark mulches recently. We've seen them around, but not in large quantities. And we certainly are on high alert for that. That seems like a real devastating challenge for our gardens. So
Mm.
but I haven't seen a ton of it.
Yeah.
We're just trying to be careful not to spread it.
All right, Helen Knepper, she said, my front lawn is filled with mounds of soil from a mole in the fall. How
Mm.
should I proceed to repair?
Well, sometimes there are mounds of soil because of worm casting. So we got to make sure we distinguish what these mounds are, and because the worm castings are actually very good. It's the healthy stuff that we need for soil. But what I would say is if you've got a mold problem, you've got to eradicate the mold. There are a couple of products out there. And what I'm going to recommend is if anyone has like product questions, because I don't have a lot of this readily available, and I certainly don't want to steer anyone the wrong way, please feel free to email us at minutemanlandscaping.com. That's our website. There is a box there where you can write some comments or requests, and we can get you the information that you need. So don't I hate to give you something and then have it not be the right thing. But we started using a couple of different products recently that are natural, that have been working on things like rabbit and moles and some other critters that have been giving our gardens here in sort of the Metro West area some trouble. And I'm happy to pass those along to you guys.
Mhm. The last part is just a comment from Maria. Lots of native ground covers, not Pachysandra or ivy. These are non-natives, and
Mhm.
ivy is invasive. I just
Yeah.
actually saw that on TV the other night. Ivy, there's different kinds of ivy, but it's very invasive, and the root system and so on. I had a question.
Mhm.
When you were talking about leave the grass clippings, here's the contradiction that I heard was you want the grass to be high, but then you say you have to mow the grass, leave the
Mhm.
clippings. So now you're going to have clumps of grass on the ground. And how do you deal with that? I'm
So
confused.
yes, that's one of the reasons why we try to mow more frequently, and so that the clippings are smaller. But what we do is we use blowers and we fan them out. So as
Oh,
we all know, after a wet mow, things are clumpy.
hmm
And because all that moisture is in the blade of grass, it's not necessarily because might be a nice sunny day, but all that moisture is in the blade of grass, and so it clumps up a little bit. But we go through with our blowers. We have these electric backpack blowers, and we do that. Now, our company has converted our mowing crews to 100% electric. Our trimmers, our blowers, and our commercial mowers are all now electric. And so we were a little afraid that they wouldn't be able to chop up the material and spread it right. But thankfully they are. They've got the bigger machines, the 52-inch machines are plenty strong of dispersing things. The other option you have too is to talk to your local hardware store, wherever you purchased your machine, and see if they have a mulching mower blade. That will chop up things a little bit more. And here's a
hmm
couple of tricks that I use. One is I try not to blow my clippings into an area that's not mowed. I blow everything out. So like, for example, I would not mow everything to the middle. I would go down one side, down the other, and then up the other side so that my clippings are always going to the outside so that they're landing on an area where I've already mowed instead of an area where I haven't mowed, because that's doubling up on the clippings, which is making them be more consolidated and making it harder for them to disperse. Um,
hmm
Also, another trick of the trade is because sometimes in the spring, the grass is growing so fast, you can't get to it in a week where it hasn't grown 6 inches, it appears. And so what I do is I raise my mower up to the highest level, which is about 5 inches or whatever it is. I mow it once and then I mow it again down to the 3.5 or the 3 3/4. So you can take a strategy like that as well. I know it's a little more work, but it's a lot of work to rake up the clippings as well. But the blower is the best way to do that. And then use a sensible mowing pattern so you're not making big piles of clippings that'll be hard to move.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The only other question I had too was we had 2 summers of incredible drought. And if you have a lawn that's sitting in the sun with no trees anywhere, and you do have an irrigation system, how do you manage that? I mean, the sun is a killer
Yeah,
for
it is.
grass. You know, it was all summer long, no rain. You know, you said wait till the next rain, but then the rain never came,
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah. So what I like to recommend is compost spreads, for example, because the Cape has a lot of sandy, so that's my puppy. When the phone rings, she gets upset. So compost spreads are excellent because compost holds 7 times its weight in water. So now you're not only doing something good for the soil biome, you're also helping your watering technique. And then the other thing I would do is, because the sandy soil, you have a problem where if you water deeply, most of it goes through. It doesn't. So you're going to probably need to water more frequently without as much water, because it's not staying there, it's going through. And then the other thing is especially in the summer, you can let that grass grow out and let it shade itself the best it can. So you're not mowing every week, maybe every other, every third. And then thirdly, what we recommend to people sometimes is, a tree is not a bad thing to have on the lawn. To have a little bit of shade can be very, very helpful for an organic lawn. Our full sun lawns tend to be our most challenging. So if you were to plant a nice shade tree, a legacy tree, might not be a bad idea.
Right. Okay, thank you. All right, I think that there's another comment here. Somebody, Maria wrote jumping worms question mark, but then she said I use white vinegar on my brick patio and
Mhm.
walkway and it works well. Spray in the hot sunny day.
Yes.
Somebody wants your email again, and I think that was minuteman.com. Well, no,
Minuteman,
and
minutemanlandscaping.com.
landscaping.com. And that was it. I think Maria repeated the big and vinegar. Yeah, so now you're getting thank yous, and I think we should probably wrap it up. It's about an hour and a half into this,
Mm.
and I think it was absolutely fabulous. You're fascinating. Your delivery is great. You're engaging. We had a great response in an audience, so thank you so
Yeah.
much, Jim.
Thank you guys so much.
Appreciate, thank you. Appreciate all the see, you got a fantastic presentation.
Oh,
Thank you. Very helpful. I could keep
good.
going. Excellent. I appreciate all the prep you did for that, because I know this is not something that you commonly do. And I know you had to design this for us. And next week you said to me you're already going to be out on the first site for
Mhm.
the season. So this was a sacrifice to do this for us, and I do
Wow.
appreciate it.
It was
All
my
right.
pleasure.
So
Thank
the
you.
the person in the beginning did ask for links. I don't know that you want to type, if I can type these in. I think Master Gardeners is a good start, but I could try to type
Yeah.
in another one.
If they wouldn't mind just emailing our website,
Emailing you.
I
Yeah,
can give
okay.
I can give them those links. I don't have them with me, unfortunately. I'm
Okay.
at home today and not in the office, so I don't have all my supplies and information. So, but I'll be more than happy to follow up with them. And
Hmm.
Wayside is tremendous. You're going to like that one a lot. It gives you a very, very complete analysis. Very,
Okay.
very nice.
Well, the reviews are still wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thank you. Isn't
Yeah.
that fabulous? All right, Jim,
Thanks
I
so much.
appreciate it so much. It was a treasure having you, and I hope we meet sometime.
I
Okay?
hope so too.
And have a
Thank you.
wonderful season. Bye-bye now. And thank you everybody else for attending. No more for the rest of this year, well, for my term, and then I'm sure we'll start ramping up again for next year. And we mean by next year, June 20th starts the new president. So bye-bye now. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.